What kind of things in life do we have to be extra gentle with? When you go to the supermarket and you're putting things in your basket and you're checking out, what kind of things do you have to be extra careful with, gentle with? Eggs. Eggs come to mind.
Bananas.
Bread. You don't want to put the bread underneath the canned goods.
Bananas.
Bananas.
To bruise your bananas.
You don't want to bruise your bananas? Okay. Kindle. Tomatoes. Okay. Lots of produce things you want to be kind of careful with. What are the kind of things we have to be gentle with besides, let's get off the grocery store. Chips. Okay, that's a good one. Since Dee Dee said it, I better make sure. Children, right? When I'm pretending to be Fritz right now. Children, right? You're always gentle with them, but that helped a couple babies today, and yeah, you handle them with special care. My parents were newly married, moving into a new house, and my mom had prepared a box, and all over the box she had written "fragile." My dad was carrying the box in the house, and there was a little step up in the garage that you couldn't necessarily see, and he had the boxes kind of stacked on top of this particular box. And he hit that step and fell down, and it was all shattered. All the china that my mother had gotten at their anniversary. I heard that story growing up. That was one of those big oops, right? When we want something to be handled with care, we write words like fragile, be careful with it. There are lots of things that we use those words: fragile, handle with care, be careful, don't put those there. And sometimes it's things that we don't want to break. Sometimes it's things like, if you're coming to fifth Sunday or last Sunday lunch, and you've got a roast, or you've got something that's got a lot of liquid in it, right? You're not going to put it on a slanted seat. You're going to be careful where you put it, because there's a possibility it could spill. So we understand the concept, don't we? And there's lots of things in life we're careful with. There's some things we should be very careful with that maybe we're not always careful with. And in the Bible, there's some words that are used, sometimes interchangeably, depending on where the context. Words like meek and gentle. That's the kind of spirit God wants us to have. And tonight we're going to look at the Sermon on the Mount. And I'm kind of going through one at a time. I could do them all real quickly. We're all familiar with them. But I do want to I want us to kind of understand the significance of what these attitudes mean to who we are. Because in life, we all deal with difficulties. Some of us deal with situations that are just mind-blowing when you think about them. Then nobody else really knows that's going on in our life. And as Christians, we don't just live by rules, we live by relationships. There's over 22 one another passages: greet one another, pray for one another, bear each other's burdens. We live by relationships. And at our core, these attitudes, these attributes, Jesus said, blessed are those who have these qualities in life. And this particular one's very important in the relationships we have with each other. In the Old Testament, Job, I should have read it and then asked you who wrote it, because you probably guess it pretty quick. But in Job chapter 14, verse 1, some of your translations will say mortals, some will say man. Mortals born of woman are a few days and full of trouble. What a statement. I mean, there's a lot of great things that happen in our life, but there are a lot of troubles that we go through, a lot of difficulties. And people need to be handled with care. So as we kind of continue to study on the Sermon on the Mount, the measure of a servant, and we look at these kingdom attitudes, tonight we're going to be looking at blessed are the meek. So Jesus said, blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. What does it mean to be meek?
Power under control.
Okay, power under control. Probably the illustration that preachers have used over time has been, a wild stallion is running free, running wild. They rope him, they bring him in the corral, they break him. And this horse with rippling muscles and strength and power and speed, now after it goes through this process, you can put a child on its back and it won't buck it off. It's been tamed. But it's got the same muscles, probably the same speed, but now all that power is under control. And as Christians, we're to be people who are meek. We have power, but we keep it under control. In fact, one very significant principle in our Christian lives is sometimes as Christians, we may have the right to do something, but we might not use that right. Sometimes it takes us a while to understand what that means. Sometimes I might have the right to assert certain things, but because of my reverence for Christ, because of my wanting to submit to someone else, because of other principles, I might not exert that right. There may have been some Christians in Corinth that had the right to sue other Christians, but they were told to go a different direction, right? So just something to think about. Well, let's think first of all what gentleness or meekness is not. It's not being weak or a doormat or letting others take advantage of you. It does not mean being soft or spineless as we follow Christ. That's not what it means. Sometimes when we hear the word meek, we think of weak. But Jesus was meek, and he wasn't weak. There was power under control. In fact, Jesus could have done a lot of things, but he approached people with that gentle spirit. What is it? Christian gentleness includes the qualities as having strength under control, being calm, peaceful when surrounded by a heated atmosphere, being encouraging, tactful, comforting, courteous, Christ-like. It's that kind of spirit. What are some passages that tell us to be gentle? Can you think of some? I mean, we're commanded to be gentle at certain times, especially. Can you think of any of those passages? Galatians chapter 6, verse 1 says, brothers and sisters, if someone is caught in sin, you who live by the Spirit should restore that person gently. But watch yourselves, or you too may also be tempted. So Paul is telling them, restore people that are in error with a gentle spirit, with a spirit that's under control, a spirit that's Christ-like. In the Old Testament, it says in Isaiah 40, verse 11, he tends his flock like a shepherd. He gathers his lambs in his arms and carries them close to his heart. He gently leads the young, the pregnant moms that have that are about to give birth. The shepherd is gentle. I once watched a documentary, and it had some older shepherds and some younger shepherds. And the younger shepherds would often be impatient with the lambs and be impatient with those that were about to give birth, and they would rush them and push them, and then they were showing the older shepherds how they dealt with them with much more care, because the little lambs had rubbery legs. They wouldn't rush them. The pregnant ewes, I guess is how you say it, they would gently lead them along. God's that way with us. God's Spirit is a spirit of gentleness. He's slow in keeping His promises. He wants all men to come to repentance. You see that Spirit in God. And we see the same thing said about Jesus. In Isaiah 42, verse 3, it says, "The bruised reed He will not break, the smoldering wick He will not snuff out." It's really a beautiful picture of, on the Nile, the reeds sometimes would, if you just brushed them the wrong way, they would break, especially if they had been hit before and were bruised. Jesus, the bruised reed, He didn't break. And when you look at Him with the woman at the well and Zacchaeus and Nicodemus and all these different encounters He had with people, He had that kind of spirit. He didn't break people. He empowered people. And that's the kind of quality He wants us to have. The smoldering wick, if you blow a candle out, what happens? Creates smoke. And back then, they had lamps all over the house. So if you just go and you blow them out, or they get irritated. So sometimes people lick their fingers and, make the process quicker to avoid that irritant. But Jesus doesn't do that. He blows life back in us, right? He's gentle in His approach with us. We're supposed to have the same kind of quality. In Isaiah 64, it says, "Yet you, Lord, are our Father. We are the clay. You are the potter. We are all the work of your hands." And a potter has to be purposeful, gentle. You can't be too rough with that stuff, right? Or it's going to mar, not turn out right. That's the way God works in our lives. He is at work in us to willing to act according to His purpose. That's His Spirit. He knows how to lead us in the right direction. And that's with gentleness. And that's the kind of spirit He wants us to have. The fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Power under control. Gentle spirit. "Therefore be imitators of God as beloved children, and walk in love, just as Christ also loved you and gave Himself up for us as an offering and sacrifice to God, as a fragrant aroma." Be imitators of God by walking in love, having that kind of spirit. Compassion. Colossians chapter 4, verse 12. "Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourself with" what? We take off the old clothes of the old man and we put on the new clothes. And what are those clothes? Love, compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, patience. Bear with each other and forgive one another. We're to have compassion. What is compassion? How would you define compassion? Is compassion and empathy part? Okay. Empathy is part of compassion, but you can be empathetic and not do anything about it. So we use words like sympathy and empathy, but compassion is seeing a need and doing something about it. It's seeing something that needs to be done and doing something about it. But there's a right way and a wrong way to do the right thing. And meekness and gentleness helps you do what you need to do in the right way. I've known people that would confront people when they were not doing what was right. I've known preachers, I've known elders, I've seen people approach people in a way that was just more destructive than it was helpful, because their spirit was just unbridled. And it wasn't healthy for the relationship those people would have with the church. And I've seen other people that were so masterful in the way they wrapped the package and did what they did. And sometimes it took diplomacy. And I remember as a kid growing up around Sunset, and I remember there were a couple of teachers there at Sunset that said, you know, when someone's in this situation, I'm learning to be better at how to approach it, but I'm not the best person to go in there. There's other people that have that ability, that gift. There are times where, and sometimes we have discussions, you know, when Ed was an elder and Johnny was here, you know, sometimes when someone needs to be shepherded, someone needs to be encouraged, someone needs to be rebuked, whatever. Sometimes you think about who's the person to go do this. Well, one very quick key is who has the relationship, right? Sometimes Johnny had a relationship. Sometimes Fritz had a relationship. Sometimes Ed had a relationship. Sometimes I had a relationship. But sometimes the decision might be who's going to be best for this. Because sometimes if you send the wrong person in, it might not have the same results. But the Spirit is a spirit of the bruised reed don't break. The smoking wick, don't just snuff it out. Do what will be for the betterment of the kingdom. And when Jesus says words like, seek first my kingdom and my righteousness, that's not just, it has to do with what we're talking about. You know, seeking His kingdom and His righteousness in the way I approach someone. In a lot of churches, some people will never go back to that church because of the way they were treated. And sometimes it was because they weren't treated with the right kind of spirit. The church must have the truth, but it must also have the Spirit. And if people think we have the truth, but we don't care, we don't treat them with care, they're not going to care. So what should disciples do with it? Gentleness. It's like other qualities. Whether it increases or decreases is going to be up to us. Some of us will naturally have a gentle temperament. Some of us will not. As Christians, we're instructed to let our gentleness be evident to all because the Lord is near. Why do you think He puts it that way? Let your gentleness be evident to all because the Lord is near. What does the Lord being near have to do with us, especially needing to be gentle?
We need to try to exemplify Christ.
Okay? Need to exemplify Christ. People don't care about what we know unless they know we care. And the way we care is important. The Lord is near. And the Spirit that's going to turn people to Jesus is that spirit of meekness. Solomon said it a different way in the Old Testament. Bind love and faithfulness around your neck, and you're going to be of good report with everybody, right? The way to be successful with people is to be bind love and faithfulness around your neck. Gentleness is a part of that. So how do we develop gentleness? We talk about faith development. What about gentleness development? How can you become more gentle?
Takes a lot of practice.
Takes a lot of practice.
Strive to be humble.
Strive to be humble. Okay? We are gentle with things we know that we need to be gentle with. Sometimes becoming aware that people are fragile. People are sensitive. Handle situations with care. When James says, be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, that communicates what? Gentleness. Because anger is not gentle. Being quick to speak is not gentle. No, am I saying that right? Being quick to listen, that's gentle. So one thing is being aware of how important it is, because when we recognize that it's needed, well, this is a carton of eggs. I probably ought to be careful with this, right? As opposed to other things. Sometimes certain situations call for us to be gentle. What other ways do you develop it? I think certainly you pray for it. I think you can study about it and try to understand it more in your life. But it's a quality that you have to be committed to. Just most of the time, anytime someone comes to me and they're looking for advice or having a problem in their life, I'm praying before I ever meet with them, and I'm praying while I'm talking to them for God to give me wisdom. And when I deal with people that maybe it's a sin, maybe it's a sensitive area, maybe you're trying to kind of help them turn and move in a better direction, I not only pray for wisdom, I think about the fact that, God, help me have a meek spirit. Help me do this in a gentle way, in a productive way. And sometimes that's easy and sometimes that's not. Because even temperamentally, I'm kind of built that way, but there are some things that I can get angry about, that I can get upset about, that can really bug me. But I think part of it is you pray for God to help you have that kind of spirit in situations. How else can you be gentle? Heard this a long time ago when I was growing up. Somebody said, if you really get upset as a preacher, if you really get upset with a congregation, go into your office and write out your sermon, stick it in a file, and don't preach it for a month. Sometimes you can be more gentle in situations where you make yourself wait. Give yourself some time. Because sometimes we break things because we rush in, right? We're impatient. We got to say it. We got to deal with it. We get anxious about it. And sometimes that's when things get broken. How else do you develop it? Many things children learn are caught and not taught. Jake, Andrew, the youngest guys in the audience tonight, if they grow up seeing people around them have that kind of spirit, guess what? They're going to catch that kind of spirit. But if they're around a bunch of joyless, grumpy people, they're going to catch that, right? People will catch our spirit. The thing is that we need to sometimes, I think more about how do we develop these kind of qualities in our life. And the other thing is you have to exercise it. You have to exercise it, or Gay has her arm in a cast right now. What's happening to her muscles? When that cast comes off, there's going to be atrophy, right? And she'll have to build that arm, that hand, that wrist back up, and it's going to come back. But right now, it's not being used. when you're gentle with people and you're successful with your gentleness, it creates success. It makes you understand, boy, that could have gone lots of different ways, and that went the best way, because that's what God has called us to. So let your gentleness be evident to all. People ought to have that feeling about us as a church. That's the way we're going to approach it. Are we going to do the right thing? Yes. But there's a right way and a wrong way to do the right thing. And sometimes the holidays are coming up. We're going to be around some people that we might not always want to be around. There's going to be situations that we might not always want to deal with. And that's where these Beatitudes, it's where the rubber meets the road. It's where sometimes when it's the most difficult is when it's the most important to practice that kind of spirit. Power under control. Maybe even having the right to say something or do something and not doing it. Being slow to speak, slow to become angry, and quick to listen. Maybe you need to make that step in your life to become a Christian tonight. We encourage you to do that if that's where you're at, or if there's something else we can help you with. Let's all develop this spirit more fully in our lives as we follow Jesus and as we stand.